Phil, I've got your magazine here. The latest issue is out.
Out
And
now in the shops.
I've helpfully unfolded it onto this article in 5 Drives and a Kick, written by Kevin Rudd. Where now for London? Europe shows the way. Kevin Rudd, you wrote this article. What's the précis? What have you written?
In a summary, let's get everyone talking together in Rugby League in London and acting as one voice and coming together in one group so we can make a sensible plan.
So since you wrote this, not much has changed in London, has it?
No, there's a lot of activity, lots of well-meaning people that are trying to do the right things. And obviously recent announcements by the Broncos regarding their scholarship and academy program have obviously caused a few waves in the local communities. And yeah, there's some challenges ahead, but I'm just hoping that there's lots of well-meaning people that can come together to get some foundations in place to go forward.
And when we're talking rugby league in London, we're not just necessarily talking about the Broncos or the Scholars or whoever, but the whole of the sport in London and the wider area.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it, you know, I mean, you might be aware of some of it, Richard. I got involved with governance of setting up international federations for the first time. You know, this is right from the beginning when there's no pitches, no money, no balls, no insurance, no players, and starting from scratch in lots of places. And when you look at London, in a way, it is like a separate region. It's a separate country. And so if you think about it from a national governing body's perspective, how do they deal with new regions that come along? So let's say, I don't know, Jersey Rugby League comes along. What are the rules? What are the rules of engagement? What do they need to do? What's the governance that you need to put in place to make sure it's coordinated in a region? Because there are some lovely things that go on in Rugby League in London, but they're like little spinning worlds that sometimes don't interact or might just bounce off each other. And that's the point, that when you start governance in a region, and London is one example, or Midlands might be another, because I was involved with Rugby League in that area a long time ago as well. You know, so you've got to start some foundations. These are the rules. This is what we play to. This is the structure. This is the strategy to try and piece everything together that you need to have Rugby League as part of communities with a professional outcome, right?
I think, you know, taking a step back, when the Broncos made that announcement that they weren't going to run their scholarship and academy, everybody who isn't involved in London and the region read that and reacted in a way that you would think that's the end of the sport. You've got feet on the ground down there. You're involved and have been for a long time now with Elmbridge, who I think statistically are the most successful community club down in that area. What is the situation like within the region at the moment? Because obviously most people outside of it will only focus on the bits they can see. Is Rugby League actually healthy in London and the region?
In answer to that question, so first, I don't want to upset any of my neighbours, by the way. I wouldn't. Depends how you measure success in a club. So I am attached to a club, but I also support lots of community clubs, and I regularly get involved with different community clubs and players and coaches from there. So just what is it like? Well, there are some really good pockets of things going on. So let's just talk about that. So there is a schools champions competition, which is great. There is a junior league, which is great. There is a primary rugby league, and there's some activity there. You've got women's development situations going on, girls rugby league going on, wheelchair rugby league. You've got some armed forces activity. Yeah, you've got the men's community game. You've got the universities that play rugby league, and they've had their first attempts to trying to get some women playing in universities in rugby league. So there's lots of pockets of things that all rely on well-meaning volunteers. Some of it's opportunistic because all of a sudden you get somebody that's from a rugby league background in a region. And then I guess what I'm coming from is, well, where's the strategic part to that? So you can't just react because such and such turns up and we're going to have rugby league here. Where is the strategy? You know, so how do you geographically do it? And that's similar to how a lot of these fledgling federations started in Europe, where you started with one, but you had two or three in mind, so you could have some neighbours to play against. So, you know, where's the strategic element, and what brings all the people with, I guess, positions of authority, positions of accountability, what brings them together? And how is the RFL, the governing body, structured to support that? So that's probably a long answer for a short question, but and it's probably giving you lots more. But there are good things. It could be better. And obviously the announcement to a lot of people and a lot of community clubs that have invested their volunteer time, their kids, and supported their kids to strive towards the performance program of the Broncos. It's a bit of a kick and it's a bit of a shock. You know, it's like when something's taken away that you've maybe thought was always going to be there. That's a bit upsetting to some people. And then it's working out, okay, well, how do you fill the void? And where's the governance that coordinates filling that void? And I guess that's the challenge for the game to get right.
I mean, we'll come back to governance in a minute and the suggestions in your article about what the next step could be and how it's an alternative to what may be there at present and why it might work a little bit better. But in terms of talent, Rugby League at the moment obviously needs a bigger pool of talent, even in the traditional areas. We've seen Kai Pearce-Paul go off to the NRL. We've seen Louis McCarthy-Scarsbrook just retire after a glittering career. These are all kids that almost tangentially came across Rugby League because of outpost work that was being done. What's the talent pool like in London and the region at the moment that you come across with all your different hats? And also, clearly we're a sport that thrives in deprived communities. You know, again, have we even scratched the surface of what is available to the sport where you are?
Well, in answer to the gene pool, the wider gene pool that is here in London, and you get lots of talented athletes that come along to Rugby League for the first time. I see that at community club level, primary school level, university level, where, you know, somebody picks up, or the men's community game. So the gene pool is there. I think part of the challenge is to make sure that the community clubs are well governed and the volunteers are supported to make a safe environment that people want the sport as part of their community life. That's one of the challenges. And then the other side is getting the coach education right. So you want better players or you want better coaches. If you have a minority sport versus a place where it's one of the top three sports, then you have to work harder. So then you have to work harder on your coaches. And then likewise, when they play, you need more support for the match officials and getting the education program right there. So there's a couple of fundamental structural issues that I think the will is out there, and there's lots of good people that would love to get involved with that type of stuff. It just needs pulling together as one formal strategy, if you like.
As an area, do you feel that sometimes you have to fight this battle on two fronts? Not just the fact that you need to develop the game in the area, but also that you're fighting against people saying, well, why should London have this funding or this resource sent to it rather than somewhere else, which I'm not going to name?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I went through that with all the international development I did for years. And people will say, okay, it's failed. But sometimes some of these situations are actually set up to fail. And, you know, who is accountable for developing a new region? So let's say somebody comes, you know, like we've got Cornwall, someone comes along in Devon, a wealthy person says, right, okay, we want to start a club. Okay, well, who's guiding them to go, well, what you really need is this, this, and this. And we need a governing body that does this, this, and this. If we set up for success and put the basics and the foundations in place before you build things on top of it, rather than an opportunistic view, then you might have a better result. And I hear what you're saying about, you know, why invest. That's part of a responsibility. You have that in corporate life, don't you? In business life, if a business stems from a region and it wants to spread out from that region, it's a decision. It's a strategic decision. Do we want to invest in external places, or can we not afford to, for example? And then okay, if you're from that region, you're looking to see, are you welcomed? Are you included? Do you feel included? Or do you feel as if you're fighting against the system? And then locally, because you're a minority sport, you're fighting on the local front to get rugby league, of interest to communities and for it to feel part of their communities, because that's quite hard work.
What do people say to you in terms of why they come to rugby league? What are the messages you're getting from people of why they want to play, why they want to get involved, and how can we use that to get more people involved?
I hear what you're saying. So the natural thing is, some people, I see it on a weekly basis. I was coaching at a university game, and I had a handball player, 2 footballers, and 2 former athletes. Never played a game of rugby league in their life, and you could see their eyes lit up. It's everything about the game itself. It's a physical challenge. It's a mental challenge. It's a spirit. It's tough. And it's a team game. And that's what people are attracted to. It's what it is. It's the game. I think that once they feel it and they taste it and have a go, that's what people get attracted to. How you set that up and get the clubs and the spaces right that you can attract more people into, that's the challenge. Getting the governance right of the community clubs, the schools programs, the education that supports the volunteers, the governance of the volunteers, getting that right is the hard yards. Because once somebody finds the sport, they like it, right? And they know, you can see it in their eyes when they like it. And that's, it doesn't matter. I see it on a weekly basis through the summer season, whether it's a 7-year-old or a 21-year-old or a girl player that comes along at 14 and gets a confidence in life through playing rugby league. It's wonderful to see.
So we had Robert Hicks on the show on Monday, talking about a whole range of issues, but London and the region inevitably came up as a talking point. I think it's probably going to be useful for everybody to understand sort of where we are now in terms of governments, that clearly the RFL do have an input, that a London Rugby League Foundation exists on the back of some of the work that's gone on before. But you've proposed something that is a little bit different by way of governance in your article, which is more in line with, as you say, how you set up new nations in Europe. What would you say is the pitfalls of what we've got at the moment, and how do you rectify that with your model going forward?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and what I mean by that is, so you get well-meaning people take on different pockets of rugby league. So let's go through. It could be the junior league. It could be universities rugby league. It could be the male community game. They get involved with a committee and they try and run the competitions. The challenge is sometimes around those committees is there gets a certain amount of nepotism, shall we say, and we get people like us or people like me or friends of mine that they see it my way, so I want them in. And when you don't have proper governance, that's what can take hold. And when you get that, is it the best interest of the game, or is it self-interest? And you've got to be careful with that. I think in terms of resources, I feel for the RFL staff in the region, because they're probably under-resourced and they have such a monumental task to do that it's impossible to do everything for all people. So there's probably a financial implication is part of it, but that doesn't come up with a strategy and a foundation that can take it forward. So there's one voice. So when different departments of the RFL or other clubs or somebody says, I want to get involved with rugby league, how do they do it? And at the moment, that's why all these federations, you have one website, one point of call. If you want to get involved with this, or this is what we've got. This is where it is. This is how you engage. This is how you get involved. We have a foundation, and I'm not sure that actually represents all the different parts of London, if you see what I mean. So I guess the improvement would be the governance at the headquarters, if you like, the national governing body, somebody accountable that goes, it's my responsibility to assess what the plan is, to measure it and see if it's actually working. And if it's not, then what we need to do is this, this, and this. I'm not sure we're there in those terms. And then certainly locally, what can happen is if there's limited resources or limited facilities, people can bounce around off each other, and certainly, and all of a sudden, different groups want it at the same time because there's limited facilities for rugby league. And, people can end up falling out with each other because, oh, we need it for this, or we need it for that. And then, like I say, you need people from London engaged and involved. So when you look across who actually runs and governs, and you can tell from my accent, I'm not from London. How many people are born and bred from London, have been through the London education system, understand what it to get involved with rugby league and the other opportunities involved, right? So they could choose a myriad of things to get involved with. Why choose rugby league? So no, it's a challenge.
I mean, the word that's thrown around the most is strategy, which again is something that you know a lot about. We're talking about, even if we look at sort of London and the South Rugby League going back to the creation of Fulham, we're over 40 years into that now. And you would have to say that success has been piecemeal, and for every step forward, there's always two back. So the question, I guess, is who should write the strategy? Does that come from the centre? And then they take a less hands-on role for it to be rolled out by people in the region? Or does the strategy start by people in the region, maybe like yourself, and others who've got experience of it with their feet on the ground, that then gets almost the checks and balances from the governing body?
Yeah, it's not a one-way street, but I think the people that can make it happen has to come from the national and or make something happen, like to fill this void that's going on between the pathway and the program. That has to come from the governing body. To engage with us as the governing body, you must have these things in place. And then the local little groups that control these different parts and facets of rugby league in the region, they can engage with it, and hopefully we get a group that talks with one voice and works together. When you look at the agendas of all those different items of what they're all aiming to do, if you ask them to all come up with what they're aiming to do, I reckon there'd be about 80% of it everyone would agree on, right? So if you can work on the 80% together that you're trying to achieve, and then work out what the differences are, then you can go from there, right?
What's more important, and this is probably one of those questions which you can't necessarily answer with a simple answer. Is it visibility of rugby league in London and the South East, or are we looking at, the NFL sells out Wembley and Tottenham Hotspur with an almost alien game with teams that don't have London in their name? So is it important that we have a London team, quote unquote, in the top flight, or that the sport is more visible down in the capital and the South East?
That's an interesting question. I'll just have a little think about that one. No, I think it, for a national governing body, I think it helps to have a London-based team. I think it helps for connections in sport and government and all kinds of things to have a visible sport as well. So what does a visible sport? Well, you need a community pathway. So, from primary school to masters, you need opportunities to take part in and participate in rugby league. And by and large, those pockets of activity exist. It's just pulling the strands together, if you see what I mean.
So you've rightly mentioned resource, both within London and the region, but particularly maybe even human resource at the governing body level. But this isn't something that's unfamiliar to you, because when you were asked to get involved in setting up nations through European Rugby League, again, there wasn't a huge pot of money. It was you travelling around those places anyway, with your full-time job, but working with a strategy document that you could measure people against. So again, is the issue not one of resource, that we get too hamstrung about how much David Hughes may have spent and in what area. We get a little bit too probably concerned with how many schools playing in the champion schools tournament as used to play. Is it more about saying, if we do have well-meaning people, what we need to do at governing body level, if we can't commit to a full-time position, is just have somebody that can say, this is the return on investment that we want, and leave it to the independent people on the ground? Is that the model that you're looking at?
There's a bit of that in there, isn't there? The key thing is, well, what does good look like? What does it look like on paper? How do you verbalize it? And how do you measure it? So let's just take it to, I don't know, a junior league level, if you like, in the local region. Well, you want a certain number of participants, you want a certain number of clubs, you want a certain number of fixtures. But then to grow, you need the insurance in place to cover all that. And then you need the coach education, you need the match officials education. So if you want to grow, you need more coaches. You need more. So how many coach educators do we have? How many match officials educate? You can measure it. And I think it starts with a document that, even if it's volunteers or part-time staff, that are all heading towards an aim and an objective. What are the aims and objectives of rugby league in London? What are they? And different people will answer that in different ways. And that was no different to how all these international federations started. But you come up with it. These are our aims and objectives. This is how we're going to try and do it. We might get there. We might have some little failures along the way, but at least we're putting something out there. This is our strategy. So whether it's, I don't know, 2 clubs in the north, 2 clubs in the west, 2 clubs in the east, 2 clubs in the south, with a couple of schools linked and a college and a university linked to it. So you've got a community pathway, and then you make it a community hub. So you have masters, and then you get involved in the local community in charitable runs and do things in your local community, and you're measured by that. Then let's just put it down on a piece of paper what it should be. Give some direction and leadership, and I think that would be helpful.
So I guess what we're probably both hinting at here is that this isn't actually a new document that needs to be written. There already are templates that do exist. And one of the things clearly that worked in the very early stages of you doing it in Europe was having 3 tiers of membership, so that you could start off as being an observer, and then when you fulfilled a certain level of criteria, you could move on to be affiliate. And then when you were even stronger and had even more influence and reach in that region, you could apply to be a full member. And with full member came some different advantages and benefits, and obviously a less hands-on approach from the centre. Is that model applicable to London and the South? Could it be instituted relatively quickly? And actually, are we further along that model than we think we are? It's just that we've never coordinated it.
I think your answer is there. It can be used, yes. So let's, what's the point of entry? You might get a well-meaning parent that says, I want to start whatever rugby league club. And they might start with primaries, or they might start with junior age, and they enter the system, and we start a community club. And they get the friends around them, their children's mates. And that seems to be, a lot of the histories of the clubs in the region, right? Some might start in the men's game. So some of the men's community team, for example, they have no involvement with juniors or primaries. Should the criteria to be part of the Southern Conference League, which is the premier amateur competition down it, should it be part of the criteria that they should? And they should have some education work going on. They should have some primary schools work going on, some junior and a junior club. So I think the templates are there, and you can almost create it to suit the environment. We have clubs that are just dabbling in some primaries rugby league. We have some that are just a men's community game level led club. You have those that are community clubs that try to have all aspects and become part of their community. The governing body can establish, well, what do they see as the important things? What are the important criteria for sustainability? Because, there's a lot of clubs in London, you can look back in the history that maybe started with opportunistic, well-meaning people, but when their journey's done as a parent, for example, then they might say, okay, it's someone else's turn to take a junior club. I started it, but then there's nothing in place to continue it. And maybe it's the next people haven't quite got the love of it and realize how much hard work is involved to make it happen. And then it folds, right? So it's not sustainable. And I think, as you alluded to, there are templates. There are people within the RFL that know all this. So that, that it's there, but we haven't actually verbalized it or written it down. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is what we would think good is for London. And then this is what's good for Cornwall. This is what's good for the Midlands. Where is it? Where is it? What does good look like? And I'd love to see it. And it doesn't take much, Phil, does it? It's a couple of pieces of paper. My aims and objectives of this, and how I'm going to measure this is this. And when I've achieved that, then I'm a little bit more serious. I'm a little bit more invested in. I've got some council funding to support some education, for example, or some facilities. And that's no different. If you're a national federation, you need government support. And can you gain government funding for rugby league in your country and things like this? So it's the same kind of things, but just wrapped up for the national situation here.
The London mayoral election coming up soon, isn't it? I'm sure all the candidates can get involved on the rugby league bandwagon. They're usually doing Wakefield when there's a stadium to be built and an election to be fought. You mentioned the RFL and the fact that there are people within who know what needs to be done. Why do you think these things aren't being done at the moment?
I guess from my experience, I had 5 years where I used to sit in the senior management meetings at the RFL. And sometimes your priority list is as long as your arm. And there are things that are immediate, things yesterday, things urgent, things medium, things longer term. So depending on where the management structure and the individuals within it are in their cycle. So, in the first year, you learn about lots of issues. Second year, maybe you try and put some things in place. Third year, you see if it worked, right? And that's no different to being a senior manager in business or in any walk of life, in an education institution, whatever. You put your strategy together and give it a go. There's a resource issue, there's a priority issue, and there's probably at the game at the moment, there's lots of maybe higher priority things to deal with. But if that be the case, then try and get the right people that would like to see it happen, would do it for fun, because they want to see foundations in place that, there can be one voice.
Again, what strikes me listening to you as well is that it shouldn't be the sole onus of responsibility on the one professional club in the region. That the governing body don't want to micromanage that club, and they will make economic decisions on whether they're going to run scholarships and academies, how they're going to be judged on that in terms of the points, grading points that they'll score further along the line, what they want to allocate their funding to. Is what you're saying basically we need to support them because the region has to have a beacon, something for the kids that are playing at your club that might be under 12 at the moment, say one day I want to be a Super League player and I'd love to be doing it out of Plough Lane. But we rely too much on one professional club that covers the largest geographical area of any club to be responsible for everything. And what you're proposing actually dovetails perhaps more into what they do. And then that's when it becomes a two-way street, that they feed back to community clubs and say, well, if you can achieve this, we can offer you that.
Yeah, it's probably more so maybe three-way and more ways. So let's give a practical example. A long time ago, there was a team put together from the RFL that assessed Catalan Dragons for joining Super League right in the beginning. So it was an expansionist idea, and we've seen the results of that, how that worked. A little bit was about the due diligence process and how it was put together and the measures put in place. So it can work, and it has worked. So it just, and how that worked in the beginning is there was cooperation and this is what probably a lot of people in England don't know about. There's the French Federation, and which is almost like the RFL equivalent, and then there's Catalan Dragons. So you've got a professional club with a governing body working together, and then they have to support the community club. So it's no different. So the model is there, it's worked. So Broncos with the RFL and all those commercial aspects that they have to deal with for IMG and the criteria that they need to meet, there are people that have put a lot of money into this over the years. So David Hughes, for example, that's a lot of money he's committed, but the RFL has committed funds too. Are we making the best use of it all? And are we talking to all the right parties to make sure that actually we're all off the same page? This is our strategy. If it's outside of that and it's not in these priorities, then okay, we'll just park that to one side. That's a nice to do, but actually we've got these to deal with. And that's what I think is missing. So, and sometimes you get, there are strong characters there because you get leadership and they have to fight above their fighting weight, shall we say, to get rugby league on the map, whether it's as the governing body aspect, or whether it's as the London Broncos, or whether it's as you walking around your local village trying to say, come and play rugby league. And you almost have a target on your back sometimes, it's the rugby league person over there, all right? That because it is a minority sport. And when you get to talk to people in the region that, they try Gaelic football or they try American football, or basketball even, where there isn't that bricks and mortar, where it's just part of the established local community because they've got a building with a lease on that's primarily for that sport. It's hard yards, and that's what you've got to aim towards, right?
And the word that you keep using is community, and that supposedly is the strength of our sport, that we are built around community. So it sounds to me like applying the principles that have got us to where we are will get us to where we need to be in London and the South. Is there any other dispensation that's needed, bearing in mind that the sport isn't familiar, not just for the professional club by saying, oh, you can have as many overseas players as you want, but do we need to look at committing extra resource because London and the South is very different to what we're used to up here?
It is, and I speak from it, obviously I grew up in Yorkshire. Went through all the system there at various professional clubs, and then lived down here and have raised my own family here. So I've gone on the journey of, and I'm comfortable talking about either. I think at the heart of some of this is education and guidance. So what I mean by that, who's actually guiding people to say, well, what is a good community club? What are the facets? Couldn't we have a link to another one that really is good and has got all the bells and whistles, or is just along the process from the clubs here? So, for example, one of the beauties of the European Federation and the International Federation, you sit around the table with other governing bodies, but you get to see where you are in the pecking order. So if you're just starting out, is everything going on at a fully professional, sponsored federation relevant to you? Some of the skills to learn from are relevant, but actually the person next along the journey is useful to you. A forum where you can meet people and get little practical ideas. Oh, we did this and this worked. And then someone can go away engaged and enthused. Similarly, education for coaching, education. Without all these things, how do you run a governing body? Who teaches people how to run a governing body? Who teaches them how to run a competition? Who gives them guidance? I think extra resource around that side of things for how you establish and put foundations in place. It's the classic. Do you give someone a fish or do you teach them how to fish? It's the classic stuff. How to run a good club. What does it take? What kind of volunteers? You can't just have a cavalry charge of one volunteer just because they love rugby league. You have to bring in people that have got skills that can contribute to running a good club, governing a charity, getting everything all open and transparent so everyone can see, right, that's what's happening and that's how it works. That's how I would engage and become a volunteer on that management group of that organization. And that's how you get it right.
You've tempted me to almost ask the general public at large, how do you run a governing body? But I know what the responses will be to that one. Time is about to beat us. Do you feel like you've got your messages across this on this mini podcast episode that you wanted to get to people outside of your area and indeed inside?
Yeah, I walk in the trenches of rugby league every week. So winter, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, summer, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And there are a lot of good people out there. And I just hope there's a lot of good people out there that want to engage because it matters to them. And that's the message out to the London people. And they can make a difference because there are good people that genuinely put hours and hours and hours on a week and yearly basis for the sport. I think it's to get a message out to the people maybe that have grown up with rugby league in their community. So, for example, myself, right? I grew up with that. And you take things for granted that you've got bricks and mortar and clubs exist and they've got pitches and they've got leases and they've got facilities. Well, when you haven't got all that, it's really quite hard and it takes a different skill set. So it's a bit like, I can buy a car and I can operate it. But when you're in a development area, you've got to have the imagination to want a car and then the imagination to understand how to build it. And then once you've built it, how do we commission it? And then how do we get the experience of running it? So I think hopefully it gives a bit of understanding to people that have just grown up that in their area, it is the game and they've got a professional club and there's thousands of people turn up to watch. That's harder on a geographical scale of London, getting everybody to one place. So if you want to travel from west of London to east, it takes you an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. So it'd be like, I don't know, someone in Leeds going to Hull to support the club. So it's just to get that understanding out there that it's not so straightforward. And I guess the message to the RFL and the Broncos is there's lots of good people, engage with them. And let's get some governance foundations in place where everyone knows how they can get involved if they want to.